We're starting to get a few comments on the chat online, asking us while we're waiting for everyone to join to comment on what the atmosphere is like over here. I think it's a very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's been great so far for the first day, and we're just great sessions, great setting,
Yes.
and yeah.
So to me, it was the first time in person this conference. I don't know if for you was the same.
For me, it was last year in Lisbon, the first time after pandemic. It is a very nice conference this year too. Yeah.
And actually, since I'm part of the organization task force, it was like a very much effort to organize all of this. So
great to
from
see it coming
Alexandra
together.
and Fernanda, yeah.
All right, I think we can get started, and those who are coming a bit late from the coffee and from the break, taking the last donuts before before we close can join us later. But good afternoon, everyone. I hope you still have a bit of energy left, or that you've drank another coffee before we begin, so that you're still full of energy for this last session of the day. So this session, as you've seen in the description, the idea of this session is to look at at the career paths, the patterns of the career paths of fellows after MSCA, notably based on the surveys that we've done with our alumni. And also then discuss more beyond the figures, the statistics, discuss more with alumni their experience and how the fellowship has contributed, has impacted on their career afterwards. So my name is Anouk Lafortune. I'm a policy officer at the European Commission, working on the MSCA program, and among other files, I work on the analysis of our end of fellowships questionnaire. So this is what I'll be doing today. I'll be presenting some of the results we've had so far, and I'm very glad that I have with me 3 alumni. Who all have very different background, different experience with MSCA, different types of actions, and also very different career experience before and after the MSCA. So I'll start in order of the online order. So we have Ornela Bardhi online. Who was, I'll let all of them introduce themselves much more later, but she was a doctoral researcher in an ITN program, an industrial doctorate program, and she's about to go back to industry, but she has had an experience since finishing her PhD in the public administration, working for the Minister of Health in Albania. Then we have Joaquin Capablo, who had an experience as a fellow it was called IAPP at the time, so Industry, Academia, Partnerships and Pathways. It was the first staff exchanges, essentially, action that we had. And now you're a co-fund manager, coordinator in a co-fund in Spain. And we have Corinne Portioli, who represents the continuity with academia. So you were an individual fellow, and you're now still working in the Italian Institute of Technology in Genoa, doing a co-fund, this time postdoc fellowship. So we have really a depth of different actions, different experiences. But yeah, I'll let you introduce much more, because I think you'll give another twist to your career path afterwards. What we'll start with is a bit of figures based on the results of the fellowship. So I'll have a couple of slides that I'll show you just to a bit set the scene, see a little bit the patterns that we see among fellows in different actions. Could we? Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for this. And so I'll just present a few slides to show you some of the patterns we see, and then we'll really go on to our alumni and really to the valuable kind of inputs and what you can share about your experience of MSCA. Yeah, so just to start off, what I did forget to say is for those who are online, feel free to write comments on the chat, because that's why I have my laptop here. We'll see the comments, and at the end, if we have, we want to give it time for Q&A, so it can be with people in the room, but we can also answer questions from people online as well. Now, the first slide here is just a little bit of a summary of our kind of the tools that we have in the program to follow the impact of the program on fellows, on our fellows. So during the project implementation, obviously we have reporting and monitoring processes, which give us information of how the projects are implemented, but also afterwards. We have the end of fellowships questionnaires that were introduced under Horizon 2020. And these questionnaires are requirements under the grant agreement for the fellows to complete at different times after their fellowship. So the first one, this was not supposed to change. So the first one is the evaluation questionnaire, which is immediately after the fellowship. You complete a questionnaire which asks you questions about to evaluate essentially your experience with the project, and also what your immediate next steps are in terms of careers. So we have data on career, on the next job immediately after the fellowship, and then we also have 2 years later we have the follow-up questionnaire, which give us a slightly more mid-term perspective on where are our fellows 2 years later, how have the skills that they've acquired helped them in their career, and how they, in hindsight, how do they rate the effect of the fellowship on their development as well. And then in terms of longer term perspective, here we're looking at the MCAA actually, because the MCAA has this pool of members since the program first started in '96, and so we can via the MCAA major surveys that are launched every 2 or 3 years, we collect valuable data on the long-term perspective and long-term career development of the fellows that have participated in our projects. Now, shameful promotion, but I've put a list of key studies and kind of publications that we have that use this data, both the end of fellowship surveys, but also the MCAA. And the first one, actually, the results of the end of fellowship questionnaires was published last month. So this is brand new, the latest data that we have on where our fellows immediately after, and then 2 years after the fellowship. So if you want to have a look at it, I invite you to go read it in more depth. A lot of the slides I'm presenting here now are actually based on that publication. Here I think I've covered most of it, just to highlight that so far when we published this study, we had nearly 18,000 respondents for the evaluation questionnaire, so immediately after the fellowship for all the MSCA actions. And for the follow-up questionnaires 2 years later, we had just over 2,000. That's because it was we started this follow-up questionnaire a little bit later. And also just obviously with time, it does have an effect on the response rates of fellows. So to start us off with this, I did have a little reminder, because obviously this is based on Horizon 2020 projects. So just to remind a bit the acronyms that will be used in the graphs. So when we talk about ITN EJD, for example, it's the ITN, so the doctoral programs, joint doctorate programs. EID, industrial doctorate program. IF, I think, is well known. Staff exchanges will be RISE. And co-fund, we have 2 types of co-fund, and we monitor both the doctoral fellows, so co-fund DP, and the postdoc fellows, so co-fund FP. Just so you keep these acronyms in mind, because obviously I couldn't fit in the full title in all of the graphs. But yeah, just to show, generally speaking, in terms of skills acquired by fellow, what we do tend to see is a general, quite high level of satisfaction with the training that the fellows receive across all our actions. covering different skills, including very scientific or science-specific, research expertise, knowledge, but also more transversal skills that they can then also use in different careers afterwards. Now that said, there are differences in terms of how successful we are with certain skills. You can see intellectual property rights knowledge, for example, is further down the tail in terms of share of fellows reporting a high increase in those skills, for instance. But also we see a little variation between actions. So generally, IF fellows tend to be a little bit more satisfied with the skills and training acquired during the fellowship. But that's not always true for all skills, because we see, for example, among doctoral researchers, both co-fund and ITN, that communication, presentation skills, the share of them considering a high increase in those skills is higher than among postdoc and RISE fellows, and that's, I think, mostly because RISE and postdoc fellows tend to consider that it's a skill they already acquired, so before the fellowship, because they are a little bit later usually in their career, and it does make a lot of sense. Now, in terms of one of the other aspects that the fellowship, the MSCA obviously promotes, is training through mobility. And so one of the things that we look at in the questionnaires is how many fellows report gaining intersectoral mobility during their fellowship, or intersectoral experience during their fellowship. And here it's quite interesting because we see quite a big difference across actions. So we know, for example, that in IF, the share of fellows acquiring a non-academic experience during the fellowship is not very high. It's around 14%. Whereas what's quite interesting is the highest is among ITN doctoral researchers, and obviously, I mean, in EID, it's a requirement for them to spend time in non-academic sector. So obviously, this is the highest. But you see, we see already kind of different experiences, which may then, and actually, in some ways, reflect in the career paths, at least the patterns that we see from past fellows. So on the right-hand side, I hope you can see well. I know the light may be a bit difficult, but on the right-hand side, we see a graph that shows in blue 3 months after within 3 months after the fellowship, so from the evaluation questionnaire, and in orange, 2 years later, the share of fellows that are in non-academic sectors, working in non-academic sectors. And here we see IF is by far the lowest share. IF fellows tend to stay in academia afterwards, with only 11-12% working in non-academic sector after an IF. Whereas what we see, which for us is quite interesting, is the industrial doctorates. Obviously, in general, doctoral researchers tend to work more outside academia after their doctorate than postdocs. I mean, they haven't, it's a step in your career where you decide which direction. If you've decided to do a postdoc, usually it's that you are at least giving it the academia a chance, let's say. So it's not unexpected that doctoral fellows work more in non-academic sectors, but the industrial doctorates are set up as a scheme for this purpose. The fellows have to spend at least 50% of their time in a non-academic in the non-academic sector, and we see it reflected in the career that they choose afterwards. So immediately after, nearly 2/3 of them are working in non-academic sectors. Now, when we look at the sectors where our fellows work outside academia, it's mostly the private for-profit sector. And we do see about 6% of all our fellows working also in either public administration or international organization. And this compares quite well with actually the data that the MCAA major survey, the last one published, collected in 2020, where we see, yes, academia is the main sector where most of our fellows are still are later on in their career, followed by industry, and then the third sector is the public sector. Interestingly, this is not really reflected when we look at the sectors of the intersectoral experience, so the secondments or intersectoral experience of our fellows during the fellowship. public sector, government organization. They represent about, depending on the action, 2% of maybe say of secondments or main host, essentially. So they are actually a little bit underrepresented compared to where our fellows end up. So this is it for me. It's a little bit of a quick perspective on the figures. And now I think, could we bring back Ornela on screen, please? Thank you. And now I guess it's time for a bit to compare a little bit what we see in the figures and live experiences of our alumni. So can I ask you, all three of you, to just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your MSCA experience, and then a little bit about your careers after. Maybe we'll keep on in the order we started. Maybe Ornela, you can begin.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Anouk, for organizing this session and for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion. So I saw definitely myself in the graphs that you mentioned before joining the CATCH ITN 8 Industrial Doctorate Project and subsequently becoming the MSCA Fellow. I was working on my own startup, which was actually a spin-off of my master's thesis research project. And during this time, I fell in love with research. So I set up to do a PhD, but I was very much interested in doing it a combination between research but applied, and with academia and with industry. So for me, it was a very good fit, this type of PhD programs. So this was me before joining the MCAA fellows, in a sense. But then during the last year of my PhD, I got very much interested in, partially due to COVID, in science diplomacy. And so after living abroad for many years, I decided to move back to my home country, Albania, and start working as a science advisor to the Minister of Health and Social Protection of Albania. But then again, in a couple of days, I will yet again switch careers and move to another sector, and I will be working for a private company dealing with healthcare data. And so for me, the graph that you mentioned, that 8 doctorate, industrial doctorate fellows, they kind of tend to move outside of academia. I mean, it's very true, at least for me, and at least for almost 2/3 of other PhD holders. And I guess I will leave to the other speakers to show their before and after MCAA fellowship, to show that indeed we are very diverse and we kind of tend to move to different career paths.
Do you want to go ahead, Joaquin? And thank you, Ornela.
So, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. So, thanks for inviting me to this session. So, I'm Joaquin Capablo. I'm chemical engineer by the University of Zaragoza. I did the PhD there about fluid mechanics, energy, thermal management. And then I moved to Italy with a Marie Curie program, so Industria Academia Partnership and Pathways, involving a company and 3 universities. So the company was home appliance company Whirlpool, so American one, and 3 universities, one in Italy, one in Switzerland, one in Poland. It was 2 years contract, and then moved back to Spain, to Zaragoza for a semester teaching. And then I moved to the industry, to Bosch home appliance company, to the heat pump competence center in Navarra, working in innovation projects with research centers and universities too. And then since 1 year and a half, I moved back to Zaragoza. I currently working for Campus Iberus. It is a consortium of 4 universities in the Ebro Valley, so in the northeast part of Spain. So they are University of Zaragoza, University of Lleida, University of Navarra, and University of La Rioja in 4 regions in Spain. So we are collaborating together, and we have some Marie Curie programs, one for predoctoral researchers and one for postdoctoral. The name is Iberus Experience, and I'm coordinating this program. We have 11 postdoctoral researchers in the 4 universities with a 3 years contract developing their careers there. And since last week, I have also started to teach at the university. So I was in the managing field, but I missed some kind of teaching task. So I saw the opportunity to teach 3 hours per week at the University of Zaragoza in fluid mechanics. So I did last week the first lesson. So thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Corinne Portioli, and I'm working at the Italian Institute of Technology in Genova, as Anouk mentioned before. So I'm a biotechnologist by training, and I have a PhD in neuroscience. It's interesting because after the PhD, I stayed a couple of years at the University of Verona, where I did the PhD in the same lab. But then I was tired about the life at the university, so I applied for a position at the Italian Institute of Technology because there was a job post for a Telethon fellowship, a national fund program, with the possibility of spending 6 months in US. So I was really excited about this opportunity. I applied and I was accepted. And while I was in US at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, with my PIs in IIT, we decided to write the individual fellowship, especially a global fellowship between US and Italy. So the first year it didn't succeed, and I was still eligible. The second year I reapplied because the score was high enough, but not enough to get the grant. And the second year, it worked. So I spent another year as an outgoing phase in US, and then I came back in Italy, in Genova, for the incoming phase of the fellowship. While I was almost finishing the grant, I was looking for the next step, and I got the chance to see a job post in IIT for a co-fund Marie Curie opportunity. And I was still eligible because I was 10 months in Italy before the application. And the interesting thing was the job that was basically matching and unifying all my background topics that I got so far, basically neuroscience, nanomedicine, and drug delivery. So I applied to this 2 years position, and I was accepted. So currently I'm both like a Marie Curie alumni and still a Marie Curie fellow. So I'm both.
And how do you find the complementarity or the difference between being an IF fellow and a co-fund fellow?
So I think the individual fellowship is you have more autonomous possibilities in the project. So you have basically completely independency in managing the budget and the project. Of course, on the top of the project there is the PI that always have to, of course, accept it and give you the green light for everything. But the budget you have to manage by yourself. For example, you can choose the training that you can attend, while I'm experiencing differently for the co-fund, where the PI has more like power compared to the individual fellowship. Yeah.
I have a comment on that. So, as coordinator of a co-fund, in our case, the researchers are independent, so they have a available budget for spending trainings and fungible material, so networking also, and they are free to spend this money, and we supervise that everything is in order with the European Union normative and university standards, but they are postdoc, and we realize that they have to be so independent as this senior position. So in our case, at least in our co-fund, we give the independency for them.
Yeah. Thank you. I wondered if you could give us, Ornela already started, but I may ask you a slightly different question. If you could react a little bit in terms of to the results that were presented and how much they match your experience of MSCA and how it's contributed to your career after. I'll start with Ornela. For you, I have a very specific specific one. I was referring to it at the end of the presentation. Is in terms of you went to the public sector as a scientific advisor to the Minister of Health, and to what extent do you feel that the ID helped you with that transition? Did you acquire the skills or experience that you needed in that type of position?
Well, it helped in the sense that I worked with patients. So I worked for part of my PhD was actually conducting interviews and field work with cancer patients in a hospital, and also work with doctors. In that sense, it helped me to understand also their mindset and their way of thinking, how they perceive the patient care. But the project itself, it wasn't much emphasis in the policy aspect. However, the MCAA and the network with people within the MCAA helped me to get extra information in the sense such as, for example, the online class, the free online class, S4D4S, S4D4C. And I got really interesting because I saw that other alumni were also interested in that. But there is not a lot of connection, unfortunately, with policymakers within the ITNs, I would say. There is more emphasis on collaboration between private companies or hospitals and academia rather than policy institutions or government.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the feedback. And in terms of for you both, what do you feel was the in the way kind of the added value of having an MSCA fellowship in terms of training and career development compared to, for example, if you'd had the national fellowship you got before or so on? What makes what does it add? And then we'll go to the negative. You know, is this? I was also a researcher before and taught in courses, and when I was assessing essays, they always said to use this sandwich approach. You start with positive, then you go to negative, and we'll conclude with some positive, hopefully, this session.
In my case, so I was working in a research center from CSIC in Zaragoza, working in project with companies, but from the academia side, let's say. And in the Marie Curie program, I was working placing the company, so from the industry side. And you realize the differences you have in terms of way of working, in time management, and without this experience, I think, or this experience opened me the opportunity to come back to Spain and to work in a company, because you are you have the skills needed to work in an international environment, to know what is the time management, the quality of the work you need, so in the enterprise or industry. The quality is important, but it's sometimes more important to reach the times frames. So even in academia, we try to reach the 100% quality. In industry, maybe reaching a 98% is enough if the product is ready 1 week before. So these kind of things you have in your mind that maybe can help you when you move to the industry.
So, in my opinion, the positive value that I got from the Marie Curie fellowship, first the individual fellowship mostly, was the possibility to networking at the intrasectoral and interdisciplinary level, and this would be, it has been a super great value, because it allows you to participate to conferences and also to spend, if you apply to the global fellowship, to spend 1 or 2 years abroad, and this will open your mind in terms of possibility also to connect to partners and eventually collaborators that with usually with a national fellowship you don't get.
Thanks. Ornela, I don't know if you also want to to add to that question.
Yes, opportunities are huge, and Corinne mentioned interdisciplinary, intersectionality, and of course, these have been a huge impact for me, because as I mentioned, I was working with different professionals, researchers, doctors, physiotherapists, psychologists, and with patients. And with a normal PhD fellowship, not a MSCA one, I wouldn't have been able to have these kind of opportunities. And I'm very happy that I think the new fellowships, postdoctoral fellowships, will include also that 6 months of possibility to do an internship in policymaking institutions, which I think for people who would want to at least try and see how things work in the policymaking side, would very much profit from this. And I think this should be part of the PhD programs as well. I might be biased, but
yeah, I think you're talking about the non-academic placements in PF that were introduced in Horizon Europe. Yeah,
yes.
it's not only for public administrations. It's any non-academic sector, but it's true that. In collaboration with the JRC, since we had a specific matchmaking event last year to try and promote those non-academic placements also to public administrations, to a bit increase the participation, or at least provide that opportunity for applicants to PF. And actually, we will do this event, another matchmaking event in collaboration with the JRC and their project Science for Policy. More in the future, we're planning to try and do it as an annual event, and not just for PF, but for all the MSCA actions. Well, now let's go down to the more negative, or at least the things to improve. Those opportunities also, they represent challenges, I guess, the mobility and so on. In hindsight, would there be things that either you would do differently, or that you think should have been improved in the projects you participated in terms of support for career development, or support for training, skill development that you would have wanted during the fellowship and didn't quite get? I'm not sure who wants to begin.
So I'm taking also the information from the survey, from the report, from the answers from the Marie Curie researchers. The issues they found is stability, that most of the contracts are 2-3 years. And for example, in the Iberos experience, we are trying to reach some Spanish certificates that gives some proportion for future contracts in the Spanish research system to give them more opportunity to have a stable position. That has to do with the career development plan that they have to prepare in collaboration with the university, with us and the supervisors. And I think here is also important to mention that an issue is work-life balance, and with this kind of training about soft skills, about time management, project management, mentorship. So another issue is conflict with the supervisors, and we are focused in the Iberos Experience program in doing a train the trainer, and when telling them, they are very happy about receiving this mentorship training and receiving this how to give feedback and how to support the researchers. And yeah, this would be the main points, I think, of issues the Marie Curie fellows or researchers are founding.
I maybe have a comment regarding the possibility of uniform the not the guidelines, but the way that each institutions in each country can manage the same fellowship. Because, for example, we are like experience, for example, with Joaquin, a different way of managing like co-fund the same fellowship, like the co-fund Marie Curie. So this would be more a suggestion than a comment.
Another issue was about integration. So when you come in another country, an institution, usually the first days and weeks you are lost. So we have a program called Iberus Connect, joining together the international and even national, some of national researchers doing the PhD and postdoctoral at a postdoctoral level, giving some mentorship to the new members of the community. And for example, the 11 researchers arriving to the Iberos experience, they have received this mentorship to topics like finding an apartment, so where I can have some support for my children to find a school for them, to where I should go if I need an ID card, to the bank account processes. I think this is also an important issue, that when you move to another country and another place, it is useful for the researchers to have a support there. Yeah.
So it's like a peer-to-peer mentorship, is it, or support system? Okay. Ornela? We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Is it a problem on our side, or is it on? Can you try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Good.
Okay, perfect. So I would definitely agree with Joaquin regarding the kind of administrative kind of issues that researchers moving from abroad would encounter when moving to a new country, for example. But in my case, I was very, very lucky in the sense that in Bilbao, where my institution is based, we had Vizcaya Talent, for example, and a big shout out to Carmen Mendez. She's in the room there now. She's one of the most amazing people in the planet, I would say, because she has this amazing project and she connects with every foreigner that comes to Spain, comes to Bilbao, Vizcaya region, and helps them. It goes above and beyond. So in the sense, I think every city or every country should have such program, because it not only helps the researcher, but also their families. And it's like a project. You don't have to rely with other researchers that are doing their job. For example, research in the university, it's rather an organization that helps also with networking, because in a new country you don't have a lot of connections, and this also helps. What I would say, also a drawback is, and you mentioned also in the graphs, intellectual property rights, especially for engineering or kind of STEM related fields. This is very important. And some of the PhD students, they don't know anything about property rights in the country they are moving, or even how they work in the university. So probably in the STEM related projects, it would be good to add such training in the training working package. And also I would add, not only for industrial doctorates, but all doctorate programs. Maybe it relies also a lot in the career office in the university, but it would be a good thing to have also part of the training program in the PhD program, preparation for other career paths for researchers. We've seen a lot of tweets and a lot of posts, a lot of blog posts, especially after the COVID and during this time, since a lot of companies and a lot of universities are letting go a lot of people, and people are trying to find other options besides academia in our case. And most of these researchers, they don't know how to have a proper CV set for outside academia, for example, because CVs and resumes in academia are slightly different from the ones that are actually used for industry. And having this kind of training and also showing them that some of the skills that they learn during the PhD are very much transferable. Technical skills are important, but soft skills are also very important. And you don't have to learn something new. It's just that you have to train your mind to think that, okay, I learned how to manage a project during my PhD, because yes, of course you learned. You manage different coordinators, especially MSCA fellowships, for example. You are required to conduct research with different partners and with different industrial doctorate in the case, and intersectoral partners. So you know how to manage other partners in the project. And you can apply these kind of skills also in industry. But it's just that the mindset has to switch a little bit. And then it's just a matter of a couple of trainings, I guess, or a couple of webinars. And researchers can also start to think that, okay, we can do this and we can do the work also outside of academia.
I fully agree with you, Ornela. So I see here very useful to prepare the personal career development plan, as you have 4 steps there. So first is self-assessment, so know who you are. And the second one is so take a look about the opportunities you have outside, job opportunities, so in industry, in academia, in policy, so in public sector. And then the next step, the third one, is to define the skills you need to improve if you want to reach these destinations. It's like preparing the trip. And then the fourth step is to prepare an action plan. So if I want to reach this goal, so I have to define the task in time that in the next 3 years, 5 years, I want to reach. And this, I think, is very useful for all of us, not for the early stage researchers for sure, after the PhD, but even for all of us, I think it's very convenient.
And I would add also that you should start preparing for post-PhD career while you are doing your PhD. I knew that I was not going to stay in academia since I started my PhD. My PhD was industrial one, and I knew that I was going to have that opportunity to get to know partners outside of academia. And I wrote my career plan according to that. But that doesn't mean that you should stick to that career plan you did 2 years ago, because you learn new things, you improve, and of course you are allowed to change your mind as time moves on. But start doing that during your PhD. Don't leave it till the end.
It's good to update the career plan. So, in fact, in the Iberus experience, they do an initial plan, and after they finish, they have to prepare another one. And yeah, even here, we have some statistics that the Marie Curie researcher have more than 20% in average success rate when preparing a European Research Council grant, starting or consolidator grant. So we want to take advantage of that and to prepare them, if they agree with that, to improve their skills in order to be able in the future to apply for this kind of grant. So as you mentioned, not waiting till you finish and then, okay, I want to apply for that, but preparing this in advance, knowing that you have a high successful rate.
Is there something more you? Yeah.
No, yes, I agree. I totally agree. But this is not only during the PhD, but also during the postdoc. Either like individual fellowship, co-fund, or I mean, it's important to think what's next.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we can open up to questions from the audience, either on site or online. So yeah, just to repeat to myself again, if you have questions online, feel free to write in the chat. We're looking at it and we can take the questions. Are there any questions from here? If you can raise your hands, I will bring the microphone to you. No questions. Okay, well, we have to see if there are more online. Then maybe I can ask you what. Well, maybe more in this case for Ornela and for Corinne, since you're just you've recently finished. Let's say, well, yours was a little bit. Later, yeah, what would be your next steps then, and how do you feel that actually, yeah, so what you've built so far helps you take you there?
So definitely is time for me to think to the independent career. I mean, in Italy it's hard to go ahead in academia. Because actually the Italian Institute of Technology, I mean, is not like a university institution, but it's like private with a public funding support. So it's like at the crossroad. So going back to the university is not easy. So it's better eventually to look for independent position in other country, eventually in Europe. But at that point, you need to be like able to move again. And to this point, I would like to connect to the previous panel session. So the balance between family and career. So you have always to take into account these aspects. So Ornela, if you want to add.
Yes. So for me, during my fellowship, it was, as I mentioned, I was very happy that it was my research was interdisciplinary, intersectional, and in this sense, I learned also that it's not only about doing research, but also what other stakeholders are thinking about, cancer patients. And then I realized that I need to work on finding what other people are thinking while they are thinking about the healthcare system. So for me, it was very important, and it is very important still, to understand and to go and work in each of these stakeholders. For example, one of the reasons why I decided to work in the Ministry of Health was that I wanted to learn how they think about the patient care and the healthcare system in general. And I wanted to know and go and work there, to have that perspective in mind. And now I want to go to private company because they have a different perspective on how the healthcare system should work and what patient care means to them. And for me, it's very important to get to know all of these perspectives, because eventually I started my career in startups, in entrepreneurship, and eventually I want to go there again. But having been in and seen all of these sectors that work on how the healthcare system and how patient care should be, it's very important to me, because at the end, I will realize which are the main issues and gaps between all of these stakeholders, and have my own kind of niche at the end. So it is kind of a circle. So I started with entrepreneurship, moved to academia, then work with patients in a hospital, then with the government, now in the private company, and then again, eventually, sooner or later, again with entrepreneurship. So for me, it's just like there weren't like the goal to end in this career path. At the end, career paths are very personal, and some people take each of these career paths depending on their situation or their final goal they have in mind. So don't think of a career path that somebody took. You should have it. It should work for you, not you should work. You should work for the career path, and be mindful in the sense that if you cannot go to that step that you wanted to go in 2 years, in 5 years, you can do it. You can take a detour, or you can take a middle step to go to that career path that you wanted to go. This is my recommendation for everybody who's thinking of switching careers.
Thanks, Ornela. I think Joaquin has something to say. We got quite a few questions on the chat. So, no, but if you go exactly.
I go first.
Okay. We'll take them in a go, and then we'll answer all of them.
Very fast. So I think related with Ornella comment and also with Corinne about motivation and family balance, work-life balance. So in the talk of previous talk, was commented that when you don't have a work balance properly defined, or a bad one, you are demotivated. And here is important. So if you feel that what you are doing is not motivating you, you are not working well. So I like a lot Victor Cooper's quotes that define that your value is skills plus knowledge together multiplied by attitude. So here the attitude is super important, and keep motivated in something that your eyes are bright. So let's say to say in a few words. Yeah.
Great, thanks. What I'll do is I'll read 2 questions for all 3 of you to answer, and then I'll walk while you answer, I'll walk to the next question on site. So the first question online is, do you see leaving academia as a fail? I have the feeling people in academia tend to think so. Is it possible to get back to academia after stepping outside for a few years? And so this is several questions in one. And the second question is, I would like to ask if after finishing an ITN program, you got the PhD, then is it easier to apply for an IF compared with someone who does not get a MSCA fellowship? So I'll leave you to answer the question, one of the two or both, and I'll come to you.
I can take the first. We were even commenting during the coffee breaks. This idea, so even last conference in Lisbon was a repetitive comment of, I'm leaving academia, not to coming back. And why not? So it is, you are learning in another sector, you learn multidisciplinary approach, but here we find that we have an assessment system that if you don't publish in industry, if you say, I want to publish that, they say, why? We don't want to tell the concurrents what we are doing. You can protect, but even in not all the cases. So then also you learn other kind of skills that in the assessment in academia are not are not evaluated as other ones. So this system of evaluation maybe could be redefined to avoid this comment of I'm leaving academia. So.
I would also add that linear careers are no longer as common as they used to be, because younger people are also in higher positions in academia, like such as PIs, for example, and they see it as an added value. So think of it in this perspective, not necessarily as a negative thing, but as a positive thing. You have an inside knowledge from another sector.
I would add a comment regarding the connection between the having like an ITN and eventually later an individual fellowship. I don't believe that there's a connection, right? So, so if you have a good project and you implement and you give like good impact in the application, I mean, they are not connected. So you can have like a, I'm sorry, an individual fellowship without an ITM before.
Yeah. So my question is a bit to do with like this interrupting the career to do different things, and it's a bit about sabbaticals. So taking maybe a year off or half a year off just to travel or to do something hobby related that's more personal than career oriented. And so I guess it's a bit of the question of if I am interested in pursuing maybe a fellowship, can I apply and then put it on hold until, say, for half a year or a year for me to start? And if that's not the case and I would like to return to academia or apply for these scholarships after that, how would you see that going along? Again, going back to this work-life balance and this arguments that some researchers put their career on hold for 2 years to do something else, how would this be seen for, say, something non-career oriented?
So here, for example, is a good example of the career plan. So if you want to apply for a grant and you know that the criteria are part your CV, part your idea, part the group you are is hosting you. So you can take into account and evaluate if for you, as if taking into consideration your values, your purpose in life, it is more interesting to spend 6 months, 1 year sabbatical, or you prefer to work and to reach outputs in order to reach this objective more easily. So, but it is a question that it is quite important to do a good self-assessment here. So the first point, I think, is the key point. So to know yourself. Yeah.
It's just more about the practical aspects. So could I apply for the scholarship and say put it on pause, or do I need? Because I finished my PhD, I come with this momentum of research, of understanding what I'm doing, what I want to do, and I want to apply to it immediately. But of course, I don't want to go into 10 years in a row of researching and not stopping.
I mean, this would be more a question for me than in terms of as far as postdoc fellowship goes, the application. Essentially, so you apply, you have around, it's about 8 months to get the results. And then you can postpone the start of your fellowship, if you're successful, up to 2 years after the call deadline. But this needs to be in agreement with your host organization. So this is not solely up to the funding body. It's also up to whichever organization you've chosen as a host. Yes. I saw there was one more question, which was more to do about there was a question on the chat, which I won't be able to read, but I vaguely remember the ideas. But essentially, there was a question on the chat about whether fellows, if we have evidence that fellows struggle to find a job after the end of their fellowship. And essentially, we do have the figures from the evaluation questionnaire. We do ask, are you in employment? Within 3 months after the end of your fellowship. And so we have statistics on this immediately after, and then we also ask the same questions. What is your current status 2 years later? So we have stats on unemployment. The one I remember by heart is the one from the evaluation questionnaire. It was about across all actions, it's about 56% of our fellows that were, of the respondents that were employed immediately after. So considering, that this includes also PhD researchers who we know, there's often a time period also when you submit until the time that you defend your thesis. So there are some that are unemployed immediately after, but 56% finding a job immediately after is quite a good. It's generally a good at least a good outcome so far. And to be honest, I do not remember by heart the figures for the follow-up questionnaire, but this is in the publication that we've just published. So I invite you to have a look at the report. Yes, and I think we are already late. I've lost track of time. Yeah. Yes, so I think we'll finish there. Thank you very much to all three of you, Joaquin, Corinne, Ornela. I hope next time you can join us here as well. But thank you very much for the feedback and for your inputs. It's useful for us as well, actually, at the commission to hear it. I hope. Thank you for all of you to have come and to have stayed the extra minutes as well. I guess, if you have more questions, we'll be around in the building for a little bit longer, so you can also ask us. But have a good evening, and see you all tomorrow.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Bye, Ornela.
Thank you.